Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Rudy's Rant, where we react to videos that are put out and give our commentary. I have another channel, as you might know, Come On Now the podcast. So if you are not a member there yet and haven't subscribed to it yet, please go to Come On Now the podcast. It is our main YouTube channel, and also please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow this one, Rudy's Rant specifically. This channel is more geared towards reactions to different videos that we see, and one of the reactions that I have a lot of opinions on are, and one of the topics I have a lot of opinions on right now are Paul George and what's going on in Philadelphia. I actually did a separate video for a series I'm doing on the other channel called Why the NBA is in the Toilet. And Paul George is a direct reason for why that is. He's one of the reasons, at least. And I'm jumping in on this video put up by the Flight Mike. The Flight Mike has over 1 million subscribers, very well known. And he did a video recently. Paul George keeps getting worse. So we're going to review this video and give you our feedback. So let's jump in on this video and I will share it with you and we'll go step by step with this video because I'm sure there'll be plenty of good stuff on here that I am going to agree with.
Certainly the Paul George, who played 74 games last year, who had the best shooting year of his career, averaged 23 points. This was the guy that they thought they were getting this year and could hold them up when Joel Embiid was out. That has not happened. He's having one of the worst years of his career.
Clearly, he doesn't look like a dude that wants to play. I hope that I'm wrong. He's class personified, one of the best people you'll ever meet in professional sports, but he looks.
I'm going to stop right there. This is even before the actual content comes out. There's nothing more that disgusts me than starting off a statement with he's class personified as a human. No one's talking about him as a human. Like, we got to stop this stuff. They got to stop the noise and how we approach everything with, oh, well, who is as a human? You're not talking about him as a human. You're talking about him as an athlete. So if you can't take the heat, don't play ball. But this stuff about how you have to, preliminarily, ease the bump into it. No, just say what you gotta say. This disclaimer, as I call it. It's a disclaimer. That's what I was thinking of the word. A disclaimer. You don't have to disclaim your opinion on what the man is as an athlete right now. And the Brian Windhorst comments about this is what they thought they were getting. I knew that they weren't getting that. Paul George is a massive disappointment. And he played one good season in 6 with the Clippers. And he finally showed up the year his contract was due. So let's continue playing.
Looks really, really bad.
There's no doubt that Paul George is one of the basketball players of our generation, but it's never been more clear that Podcast P's time is up, at least as a basketball player. But his exhilarating career as a podcaster is just getting started. Just last year, he was an all-star, but now he's a complete liability on a heavily underperforming team. While guys like James Harden and Stephen Curry are still playing at an elite level 15 plus years into their career, Paul George is showing more than ever that his prime is far behind him and that he's slowly become one of the worst value players in all of basketball. So before we get to the content, we started a brand new baseball channel called Uni Diamond Talk. I'll leave a link to it in the description down below. We're giving away 10 copies of MLB The Show 25 to a subscriber that turns on their notifications on that channel. Now that we get all that out of the way, mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? After what seemed like yet another guaranteed all-star appearance with the Los Angeles Clippers from Paul George in 2024, he would hit the free agent market, testing free agency for the first time in his 14-year NBA career. And he wouldn't be testing it for long, because just a week after free agency opened, George would agree to a 4-year, $212 million max contract with the Philadelphia 76ers, with $176 million of that money being guaranteed upon signing. And if we're being completely honest, at the time, it did make some sense. But if you really did a deep dive, then you could have said that this was going to come all along. I mean, if you take a look at Paul George's tenure with the Los Angeles Clippers, ever since the Los Angeles Clippers got fleeced in the Paul George trade with the OKC Thunder, Paul George played 48 games in his first season with the Clippers, 54 games.
Fleeced would be an understatement of the year. The Clippers gave away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Shea Gilgeous, SGA they gave away. Like that guy is at worst a top 7 guy in the NBA right now. He's probably the leader for MVP right now in this season, but he's easily a top 7 player in the NBA. I mean, probably top 5. That's who they gave away for Paul George. Jesus. Crazy.
31 games in his third season with the Clippers, 56 games in his fourth season with the Clippers. And oh, look at that. When he's on a contract year, he plays in 74 games. Not only that, but he also has his best field goal percentage of his entire career. Almost as if he's trying to convince the NBA that he is aging like a fine bottle of vino. And to be honest, there is a very legitimate argument to be made for that. Shooting 41% from 3 while averaging 8 3-point attempts per game while still being an all-star, having a 3.3 value over replacement player, a 3.2 box plus minus, positive offensive box plus minus, and defensive box plus minus metrics is a solid way to give your agent some leverage to get you one last maximum contract before you ride off into the sunset. And it's kind of insane because throughout the entire Joel Embiid era, Philadelphia 76ers fans have been lamenting the Tobias Harris contract, saying that the Sixers made a horrific mistake committing that salary to Tobias Harris, which handicapped the team in building a contender around Joel Embiid to potentially get them past the second round of the NBA playoffs. At the time, a player of Paul George's caliber definitely did deserve a max contract, especially on a team looking to compete for a championship. But the problem is, Philly wouldn't be getting the Paul George that they paid for.
I disagree with him. I don't think he deserved a max contract. I don't think he earned a max contract. I think these teams in the NBA are desperate for what they hope are guys that they can rely on. You have to be honest about who Paul George is. You're lying to yourself if you thought that Paul George deserved or earned a max contract. Not a chance in hell did he deserve or earn a max contract. No way, shape, or form. This man is 35 years old in May. He'll be 35 in May. You gave a man, a 34-year-old who's prone to injury, who's softer than butter, a 4-year, $211 million deal that runs him to the age of 38? No, 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 no. He did not earn it. He did not deserve it. The Clippers were smart to not make that offer to him. They added by subtracting him. They're better off without him. If they were stuck with that man for 4 more years at $50 million plus a year, that's just a horrendous decision and deal. The guy, like Flight Mike said, like he played 48, 54, 31, 56 games. The man's never available. And that's continued this year as he's already missed 1/3 of their games. Yet we have a team like the Miami Heat that wouldn't give a guy in Jimmy Butler a 2-year extension, despite the fact he brought them to the finals twice in 4 years. Paul George has never brought anyone anywhere. So, no, I disagree. He did not earn or deserve a max deal, but let's continue.
And that was never more evident than it was in the Sixers' final game before the All-Star break. Philadelphia would take on the Brooklyn Nets, and if you just look at the final score, it doesn't seem that bad. Philadelphia is only losing by 4 points, 100-96. However, the major problem with this game was Paul George's performance. Philly didn't have Joel Embiid or Tyrese Maxey. You would think that Paul George would finally take over. Historically, whenever the other 2 stars are out for your team, the third star usually will have an incredible performance. His usage would go up. But in this particular game, Paul George scored.
I'm sorry. I got to add this. I forgot. I forgot. He's the third option. Philadelphia gave a third option a 4-year, $211 million max contract? A third option? Who in the hell would make that kind of decision? That's insane. It's not even the second option. It's the third option.
2 points on 7 shots in arguably the worst game of his career. To give you an idea of how bad Paul George was that night, Bronny James outscored him, which is insane. Your 2 best scorers are out. The rest of the roster is average at best with the ball in their hands, and you're making $50 million. You should be able to take over a game and beat a Nets team that's fighting for Cooper Flag this season. The thing is, though, he doesn't have to take over. All he had to do was not score 2 points, and they lost by 4.
Not be terrible.
They lost this game because Paul George is an absolute disgrace. They didn't lose the game because Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid didn't play. They didn't lose the game because they weren't as talented, even with young guys out there. They didn't lose the game primarily because Nick Nurse didn't play enough guys and didn't play the right rotations.
This was beyond sad to watch. Paul George looked less competitive than ever, missing shot after shot that he would make the majority of the time in years past. I mean, he completely shot Philly out of this game, breaking 3 after 3, including a snatchback that left him wide open. And stars do have off nights from the field, but it wasn't even just that. He was committing completely careless turnovers, throwing the ball over his teammates' heads, and acting like he'd never pick up a basketball before when a double team came his way. This was the worst game of the season for Paul George, and the guy still went on vacation a few days later. I mean, look at this. Does this look like a man that's concerned about his basketball career?
No, it doesn't. It looks like a guy who's more just knows that he got a big check and he's guaranteed $200 million over 4 years. I mean, well, 176 million technically. He's guaranteed $200 million over 4 years. Why should he care? He doesn't care. He's almost 35 years old. He's at the tail end of his career. He conned the Sixers. I mean, he conned the Clippers for 5 years. On top of that, this is the man that's averaged has scored less than 9 points or less 7 times this year. This is a man who in 9 of the last 10 games has not broken 20. This is a man who in those 10 games, the last 10 games he's played, they're 2-8. This is a man who in the last 7 games, they're 0-7 with him on the court. This guy is a problem. He scored over 33 times. He scored less than 10, and that's the 9 7 times. He's not concerned. He's a podcaster. He couldn't care less about basketball anymore. The worst thing that happened to Paul George, beyond the fact that he was already soft, was that now he has other options. Other options while being paid a truckload of money to quite frankly suck at basketball. But let's continue.
Does it look like an individual that's frustrated with the fact that he is single-handedly tanking a contending team outside of the play-in? Doesn't really look like it. Still, this game may have been his worst as a Sixer, but the fact that it isn't by a large margin is a major concern. Over his last 5 games since returning from an injury, George is averaging a whopping 10.2 points on less than 40% shooting from the field, and Philadelphia is losing each and every one of those 5 games. And it's not like his season numbers are any better. In his first year of his max contract, 34-year-old Paul George is averaging 16 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 4.3 assists per game on 43% shooting from the field and 36% shooting from beyond the arc. These are the worst numbers he's put up since his second year in the league when he was.
Consider the fact that Jimmy Butler was averaging 20 and 6 and 5 on 53% shooting when the Miami Heat traded him for Skittles. God.
Was just 21 years old and was playing next to a prime Danny Granger. His focus isn't 100% on basketball, but at the very minimum, he's making a lot of people money on Prize Picks. I mean, those Paul George unders are practically guaranteed at this point, which reminds me, we've been on an amazing streak on Prize Picks, making $400 off of our last 3 picks, which proves that my data analysis model works. Sign up for Prize Picks using my promo code microphone to get $50 when you make a play of $5, and follow my Instagram at @theflightmike to see my plays. I also give away additional plays on patreon.com/microphone. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor.
I think it's a legit banger. It's in every locker room. I know LeVar like, yes, I told you. He better than Jay-Z. We just needed time to see it.
It's rough, and it's an even worse look considering that just before the season.
That shit's embarrassing, man. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. There's no other word for this. This is embarrassing. This man's got no pride. He got a lot of money, but he's got no pride, no integrity, no work ethic. It's a disgrace.
Started, Norman Powell called losing Paul George addition by subtraction. And now that statement holds true more than ever. The Clippers went into the All-Star break with a 31-23 record. And while they're having a worse season than they did last year, they're still currently in the playoffs. And that's without Kawhi Leonard for most of the season. Norman Powell is a huge reason why. He's been outperforming Paul George all season long, but especially as of late. Over his last 4 games, Paul George has 42 total points. In Powell's last game, he scored 41 alone. Somehow, Paul George is even being outperformed by Bronny James in 30 fewer minutes, and even Kai Cenat of all people had more points than him in their last quote-unquote NBA game. Now, some fans would mention that Paul George may have been playing with an injury.
He's been doing everything that he can to be on the court, though, and to try to be available.
I totally do not care. I totally do not care. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear he's trying to play through an injury. The man's always injured. He's always injured. Don't want to hear it. Real men play through injuries. There are hockey players that play through broken ribs, broken sternums. I mean, my God, this guy is always hurt, and there's always a new excuse. You're playing through injuries. You scored 2 points in a game. You're 6'8". You scored 2 points.
Told it's to the point where he has gotten injections to play and compete over the last 4 or 5 games. Now, that's something that players do come playoff time, not necessarily in the regular season.
So you could use the fact that he's literally been using injections to play as an excuse as to why he's been utter garbage. But I won't. You're being paid $200+ million to score more than 10 points per game, and you can't. And the worst part is this contract is backloaded. He's set to make $56 million in his age 37 season. And it's not like Philadelphia can just get out of that. They guaranteed him $176 million. He does have a player option, but you know damn well he's not going to be opting out of that.
Hell no, he's not opting out of that contract.
$56 million at the age of 37?
Hell no.
Nobody else would pay him even a veteran minimum at that point with the way he's been playing. And realistically, nobody in the world would turn down $56 million to do absolutely nothing. It's pretty much guaranteed at this point that unless you're LeBron James, anyone over the age of 35 years old will not be getting a max contract anytime soon. Unless if you happen to be Jimmy Butler, but we all know that's a different story. Jimmy signed a 2-year, $110 million extension that will last until his age 37 season. The same as Paul George, and that was with the Warriors when he got traded. But the difference,
the Warriors are 6-1 now with Jimmy Butler on their team. Realistically, should be 7-0, but they're 6-1 with Jimmy Butler on their team. And Jimmy Butler is reinvigorated. He's excited. He's happy. He's all in. And I mean, that was the guy. I'm a Miami Heat fan. That's the guy I loved. And that's the guy that I was so sad when they decided to trade him, because if they had offered him the money, he'd have taken it and stayed. I'm convinced. I don't care what he said publicly. If they had given him the 2 years that he wanted, 2 extra years, heck, he didn't even take 2 extra years. He asked for 2 years on top of his opt-in next year. He canceled his opt-in and took 2 years. If you're telling me the Miami Heat would not do that, cancel opt-in and take 2 years at $120 million, $120 million, I thought the Miami Heat blew it. I still think they blew it. And Jimmy Butler is 10 times the player that Paul George is. He's damn sure a lot tougher and damn sure more playoff man than Paul George.
difference was that Jimmy Butler is currently competing at a high level at age 35 and has given Golden State the boost they need to become real contenders. And honestly, I don't imagine Jimmy Butler just trying to play up a season so he could get a max contract, because Jimmy Butler has always been known to be a psychopathic-like competitor. And when he has an opportunity to potentially win an NBA championship, I can't imagine him taking his foot off the gas pedal anytime soon. Meanwhile, Paul George has completely killed the cap situation of a team team that can't stay healthy and can't win games. And even if they did make the playoffs, which is where Jimmy Butler shines, nobody has any faith in a man who got the nickname Pandemic P after a few historically bad playoff performances. I mean, remember, this was a guy that was on the #1 team in the Western Conference and blew a 3-1 series lead to the Denver Nuggets, which featured a game where he shot this. The fact of the matter is, Paul George isn't a needle mover. He may have been in his early days with Indiana, but he absolutely isn't anymore.
He wasn't a needle mover then either.
Tobias Harris, who Sixers fans wanted gone for years, to replace him with Paul George. And Harris is playing a big role on a better team this year. Honestly, you can't make this stuff up. Who would have thought that Tobias Harris would go to the Pistons and perform better on the Pistons than he would on the Sixers and elevate the Pistons to a better team than the Philadelphia 76ers currently are? Philly messed up by choosing Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler, and they tried to right that wrong by pairing a 9-time All-Star, potential Hall of Fame player in Paul George with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey in their.
The Sixers management is so bad that if they had just kept Jimmy Butler over Tobias Harris, they would have probably won at least one championship, more than likely 2 championships, with Jimmy Butler playing next to Joel Embiid. And then you add in Tyrese Maxey. Oh my God. That team would be absolutely disgusting. Disgusting. And you change what you decide now is let's dump Tobias Harris, and where you could have resigned him for a lot less money and keep Paul George and go get Paul George at a max deal. And now you're worse than the Pistons. Jesus. Whoever's the GM of the Sixers should get fired.
Primes, but the truth is they'd be in the same spot right now if they still employ Tobias Harris.
Paul George, you have to elevate your game. The Clippers let you walk. They didn't care. Matter of fact, they're in the thick of things. They're doing just fine without you. You were bought over to move the needle in some type of fashion. And he's not doing that, Shams.
And that's why the future of Philadelphia 76ers basketball is so interesting. Because on one hand, you have incredible drafting by this front office. They selected Tyrese Maxey a few years ago. And Jared McCain, despite his cheesy TikToks, is incredible when he's on. It looks like they're ready to take over and lead this team to success. But on the other hand, you have Paul George and his brutal contract, on top of never knowing when Joel Embiid will play. On paper, this team has enough talent to win it all. They even have veterans like Kyle Lowry with championship experience.
Oh, Kyle Lowry's
but the 76ers currently sit at 20 and 34, which isn't even good enough for a play-in spot. So talking about how they can win a championship is redundant. If this team were healthy, with Embiid and McCain playing as many games as possible, I don't think this team would be anywhere higher than the 8th seed. And with the way George is regressing and the health and realistically the playoff resume of an already 30-year-old Joel Embiid looking worse than ever, it's looking more and more like the 76ers championship window is closed for good. The best possible thing for the 76ers might not even be possible, but they need to offload Paul George's contract before it gets too late. I highly doubt there's any chance that
I have a better recommendation. They need to go to somewhere where you have I'm kidding. They need to go find a Philadelphia goon who can somehow make Paul George's career end so that he retires. Maybe then they can get a waiver by the NBA. Obviously, I am joking. I kid. But this is criminal. This is fraud. I don't understand how this is not a fraud. Paul George is a fraud. The Sixers got defrauded in this case. I don't get it.
This will happen, at least not until 2027 when his contract reaches his last and most expensive year. But as long as Paul George is making $50 million as a Philadelphia 76er, this team has no shot of winning. Now, if 2019 Paul George miraculously makes a comeback,
it will not happen.
Bite my tongue, they have a shot. But 2025 Paul George is clearly not the answer. Not even close. He's a complete offensive liability.
He's a bum.
This is the defender he was a decade ago, let alone last year, and is simply just taking away shots that could be taken by Tyrese Maxey. Maxey is clearly the team's franchise cornerstone, and he's the player that the Sixers should build around. But by the time Paul George's contract expires, they'll still be paying a 35-year-old Joel Embiid $70 million to play about 20 games. Once that final year is up, Tyrese Maxey will be a 29-year-old pending free agent, who in all honesty could be on another team at that point after requesting out of that horrible situation. However, if Daryl Morey is somehow able to package Paul Paul George with a pick or maybe a young asset and get anyone back who can make a positive impact for this team, Philadelphia could be right back.
These two guys are both untradeable.
Joel Embiid is still one of the best players in the league when he's healthy, and they still have the potential to make the NBA Finals under him if one, he steps up when it matters, and two, Paul George isn't on this team. At this rate, he's going to be getting paid $56 million to ride their bench for 82 games in 3 seasons. Philly messed up big time signing Paul George, and unless a miracle happens, it's only going to get worse from here. I'm sorry, Sixers fans. But you know who's a player that's starting to break out? After 6 years, Bol is finally breaking out for the Phoenix Suns. We have a completely separate video on his breakout, and I'll leave it in the end.
All right, that's an awesome video from Flight Mike. Appreciate Flight Mike, of course. His description will be his link will be in the description. You probably already subscribed to him though, but I will put all his information there. Look, end of the day, I think Paul George is a disaster. I've never been a fan of Paul George. I wasn't a fan of his when he was in Indiana. He was the reason that team got destroyed. Rumors about his behavior with other players' wives, allegedly. Yeah, he's always been a kind of a fake and a phony to me. Never been a fan. I've always thought he was highly overrated. Let's go back. I thought he was a guy who he outperformed what I expected of him, but then became completely overrated. He had the one great year in OKC, but that was really still Russell Westbrook's team, as Westbrook had a triple-double season again. And then he bails out and goes to the Clippers. I know it was a trade and all that stuff, but he wanted out and he got his wish. It seems like he likes to force his way out of situations. And the one time that he probably didn't want to force his way out, which was in LA, because they didn't want him, now he's just a malcontent and doesn't care, is more focused on a podcast that is obviously doing great, but at the same time is just a massive disrespect to teammates. It's a massive disrespect to the franchise. And I just think that he's a lost cause. He's selfish and he only cares about himself. He's selfish and only cares about himself. Doesn't care about the team, doesn't care about his teammates. And the Sixers are in have massive issues, stuck under $130 million in contracts to 2 players who cannot play. I mean, I would honestly be okay if the Sixers got an option to amnesty. I don't think amnesty doesn't exist anymore, but if they had the option to somehow get some type of relief from the NBA, because I think they've gotten screwed. And by 2 players, and yeah, you can blame themselves, but it's one of those things where you look at it and you're saying, this is just ridiculous. This franchise is destroyed, and they have a superstar level kid in oh, sorry, excuse me. They have a superstar level kid in Tyrese Maxey. It's just utterly. I'm sorry for that kid because he should be demanding a trade out of there because he's stuck with 2 dead dogs. But hey, great video by Flight Mike. Again, he will be in the description. Please be sure to subscribe to this channel, Rudy's Rant, and also go on over to Come On Now, the podcast, and subscribe there. We'll do another one of these, another reaction very, very soon. I greatly appreciate y'all. This is Rudy's Rant. We talk facts over feelings. I hope you enjoy this reaction, and we will see you soon.